Actually, this talk sort of segues rather well from Alison's wonderful introduction in a number of ways. This presentation explores the challenges in composing for an ensemble which combines musical instruments from different cultures, including instruments with different construction, tuning systems, playing methods, cultural, historical, and spiritual meanings. Of particular interest is how composers and the collaborating performers go about finding a common ground, where instruments from two cultures can meet and connect to provide musical and spiritual meaning. And I'm going to ask your indulgence to please excuse the use of extracts from pieces as we go on. My apologies in advance for taking the music out of context like this, particularly to Michael, who's here. I hope you'll forgive me, but I felt I had to include musical extracts as we went. Hine Putahui by Gillian Whitehead was commissioned by the New Zealand International Festival in 2002 for Tangaporo, performed by Richard Nuns, and the New Zealand String Quartet. Hine Putahui is the Maori goddess of peace and guardian of the good, o hui. The gourd, used to carry food and water, is a symbol of peace. Gillian Whitehead notes that many of the instruments in this work reference that connection, including the poea whiowhio, kawowo ponga ihu, the hui puru hui, which is a large gourd blown across the top opening, and gourd rattles played by the string quartet. With regard to the links between the tangaporo and the string quartet instruments, she mentions that both are made from plant material, they have sound holes and they have resonating chambers, and she also uses the ku, which is a string instrument using the mouth as a resonating chamber. And she mentions that the parallel movement that she uses in the strings can be seen as imitating the two voices, or the voice and the spirit voice, of the orororangi flute. So throughout the work, the two groups of instruments are integrated texturally in a number of ways, whether by using sustained or drone material in the strings over which Nuns improvises, or a strong tangaporo call over more active string quartet writing, or with a more integrated approach in which the quartet may mimic or blend with the sounds of the tangaporo. Most of the material is improvised to some degree. The pitch of both melodic and drone material is matched to the accompanying tangaporo, and both drone material and parallel intervals are frequently the interval of a perfect fifth or fourth. The generating melodic gestures which are written out frequently include either a semitone plus a minor third, or are improvised between a 3 semitone cluster, or a major second plus a minor third. And vertical chords create a more spacious and somehow more mystical version of these clusters. For example, you might go from C, octave C, semitone D flat, major ninth, E flat to create the chord. So in the extract I'm going to play, taken from around a third of the way into the piece, the ku is played along with a drone in the cello and parallel melodic movement in the strings. The ku part is marked dance-like improvisation. The ricochet type effect of this is echoed in Coligno Battuto effect in the string quartet and other sections of the piece. If the perfect fifth drone and the parallel perfect 12th interval echo back to medieval parallel organum, the addition of a very soft major seventh parallel interval in a kind of whistle tone in the violin reminds me immediately of Whitehead's reference to the spirit voice of the orororangi flute. So here's an example. The passage of time in the piece is marked by solo moments for both the tangaporo and the string quartet instruments, sometimes of great virtuosity and intensity, the most climactic of which is the entry of the putatara and pukaya at the 2/3 point through the piece. Following that, there's a viola solo, after which we hear the ororangi, which is made from the neck of the gourd. You can also hear at the beginning the violin imitating the sound of the flute at the beginning of this extract. The concept of linking the choice of instrument used to the program behind the music is also found in Victoria Kelly's Toi Hurawewa, Suspended Way, which features tangaporo performer Horomona Horo with the New Zealand Trio. In this work, Victoria expresses a desire, in her words, to create a musical world where the Maori and Western musical tradition could communicate in the same language. To do this, she explores the idea of transition through the creation of a mythical love story between Poiaki, the native New Zealand case moth, and Tawhiti, her lover. Kelly also makes reference in this myth to the ancestry of the Maori instruments, as the case moth is the earthly representation of the goddess of music, Raukatauri, represented musically by the putorino. In her program notes, she makes note of the fact that because Maori mythology is fundamental to the art of tangaporo, and because many mythologies exist at the ancient heart of Western art, this felt like a familiar place for everyone. The piece is a result of a collaboration with Horomona Horo and the performers of the trio, who experimented with matching each other's sounds and selecting instruments which fitted best with the sounds of the trio and were best suited to the telling of the story. Jack Body's fascination with sounds and musical cultures from around the world, but particularly from Indonesia and China, has reshaped and transformed the New Zealand musical landscape. Many of the ideas around the combining of instrumental sounds from different cultures might stem from his example. Here is what ethnomusicologist Du Yaxiong says about Longyear from 3 transcriptions for string quartet by Jack Body. Through the use of new techniques that retained the original flavour, the piece captured vividly the qualities of the mouth harp music. I was in awe of the ingenuity of the work. In the ancient Chinese classic book of music, it says that the rise of musical sounds all around originates from the human heart, and only music is incapable of lies. Through the magical music, I came in contact with a big heart that loved Chinese people and their music. And that quote, I'm sure you may already know, comes from the book Jack, celebrating Jack Body Composer, edited by Jennifer Shannon, Gillian Whitehead and Scylla Askew. I'm sure many of us are familiar with this piece, and I won't play the extracts, But in the transcription for string quartet, the harmonics of the original are separated into 4 string parts, using a mixture of pizzicato, harmonics, or ponticelli, scordatura, specific articulations, and hummed notes to achieve the effect originally played by one single performer. Through Jack's friendship with Professor Gao Weijie from the Central Conservatory of Music, Beijing, a project came into being whereby composers from China and New Zealand created several new pieces for the Forbidden City Chamber Orchestra and the New Zealand String Quartet in a joint performance. I'd like to conclude with a look at one of the pieces from this project, Phases by Michael Norris. And I apologise to him in advance for my take on the piece. In a Radio New Zealand interview Michael Norris gave about the piece, he describes his initial concerns over the need to find a musical language that brought the two ensembles together. So this is a linking theme in all of these pieces. And he comments that the opportunity to take drafts of the material to Beijing to try out with the group led in turn to new insights into aspects of balance and dynamics. As in Victoria Kelly's work, Suspended Way, the idea of transition plays an important part in the piece. Kelly describes it as the point where the spiritual and physical worlds intersect. Inner Phases is inspired by the Chinese philosophy of wuxing, or 5 phases. The program note describes the piece thus: in Chinese philosophy and cosmology, the 5 phases are a taxonomy of the cycles and processes of the natural world. Every phase follows, overcomes, or generates another. Spring follows winter, wood feeds fire, fire melts metal. The flow of energy from one phase to another can be expansive or destructive. In Inner Phases, this constant flow of energy is made tangible by the pulse streams that form between Western and Chinese instruments, often with a dynamic sliding in pitch that recalls the contours of Chinese tonal speech. Norris uses the idea of 2 downward and 1 upward glissando as an opening gesture, and then transforms it from the gestural to the thematic to become the key motive in the piece thereafter. This gesture and the use of glissandi in general can be seen as creating in the meeting place, where both instrumental groups can exist and their timbral colours can be blended. The role of sustaining pitches and harmonies is given to the shun. Frequently, chords are built up gradually from a single note, providing an increase in intensity and dynamic. This build-up in pitches from a single note and then back down again is another key structural device. Octatonic scale patterns are frequently used, and an interesting link back to Hine Putahui is the stacking of major and minor seconds, or semitones and minor thirds, used both to create vertical harmonies and to generate melodic material. The shell has a particularly soloistic role with the most sustained melodic lines. The string quartet frequently utilises harmonics and glissando to provide a shimmer to the texture. So here's a very, very short extract which gives us the first glissando on daran, guzheng, water gong and pizzicato cello. But here is another later interpretation of that glissando. So we're around now. We've gone 5 minutes through Michael's piece. The slides are then transformed into a foreground melody, and in this next extract we hear a pulsed and melodicised version. There is a melody in violin, harmonics and erhu, whilst Darwan and cello provide the pulsed bass line, and pipa, Yangxian and Sanxian have a middle ground of running octatonic passages. And later again, a further development of the glissando idea leads to an expressive shell solo. The 16th note pulse re-establishes itself, but I was fascinated at this point having the feeling of being suspended in slow motion, a sort of rhythmicised version of the layered chords that the shung first plays at the beginning of the piece, with use of semitones and minor thirds giving the piece a hexatonic quality. The screen shows the string quartet, Erhu 1 and 2, vibraphone and shung at the beginning of the audio. This is what I call a suspended version. Michael can tell us later if it's anything like what he's thinking. And the piece continues to gather momentum, finally reaching a motoristic section using oscillating stacks of these tertian chords. To bring the piece full circle back to the beginning, harmonics gradually take over from the stop note, the intensity fades, and the piece ends with a memory of the opening gesture, but this time with a hint of remembered pulse, adding momentum as if the music is fading into the distance. So this has been a snapshot only of some types of cultural interaction that can be found within New Zealand contemporary composition. And in all of these cases, collaboration between the composers and expert and knowledgeable performers is a vital component, enabling composers to respect cultural traditions, whilst having, in the words of Stephen J. Hall, again discussing Jack Body, a curiosity for sounds that express the universal while being rooted in the place they are made. Thank you.